Hello, everyone, and welcome to our series of webinars. So today is our second session dedicated to metadata excellence and tagging. Prior to that, we were talking about segmentation and personalization. And next time, we're going to talk about standardization. So you can register for the next webinar or to get the recording from the previous session just by scanning those QR codes. So they're all available. And today we're going to focus on those very important themes of how metadata and tagging plays in the overall content management approach and specifically to modular content. So just some housekeeping points. This session will be recorded as always, and we're gonna be posting the video to our YouTube channel. And we will share the recording to those who could not attend in a follow-up email, or you'll be able to share with your team. So also, this is meant to be a very interactive session. I will be talking just a little bit at the start, and then we'll have another expert joining. So also, post your questions into the special window that you see, and we'll be taking them as we go. Also, I'll have our assistants pointing out most relevant questions. For those that we won't be able to take, we will all of them in the follow-up webinar. So hope you all can share can see my screen, and we're gonna get started just in 1 minute. Make yourself comfortable and get ready to dive into the topic of metadata and tagging. And just to start, so most of us, well, me included, relate to the digital asset management tools mostly as a library. It's like where you organize assets, where you store them, something like that. But as recently, and also as we were prepping for this session, I came across a very interesting concept, is that DAM is actually not just a library. It's not just for that. And it's also can be treated as a gym. And this is actually something that's very close to how I feel about metadata and digital asset management systems, just because it's not just for organization of content, of different assets, of storing large volumes of files. It is also something to get actionable insights on your assets. So alongside of the library way of looking at metadata and DAM, and the issues that it comes, how to organize the documents, how to search them, how to organize those big files. It's also one of the important issues that is still missing in most of the DAMs is, how to get more actionable insights on the data. And today, specifically, we're going to focus on how metadata tagging will help you solve the issues, how you'll be able to find the right content at the right time, how you can create all those naming conventions and do it in a consistent way so that you can discover content more easy, and also identify the assets that you can then reuse, but also how you can see how your assets are performing in the fields, in the campaign, and also enrich the data on those assets based on how they perform. So that's why we think at Viseven that connecting digital asset management systems and campaign tools or customer engagement systems is very, very important. So it's not like, the metadata is like this way of describing like data about data, right? On top of the information that's about, all of those individual assets, available materials, it will also connect them to the brand plan, to your customer engagement programs, and to the campaigns, so that the assets will be able to fit into the right place to the right client of your customer engagement initiatives. And with this, I would say that I'll be able now to welcome our guest, and I'm really happy that we managed to get hold of him. So this is Dennis, our lead product manager. So the great thing about Dennis is that he has more than 10 years experience in pharma and also on top of pharma. So he was working a lot on different project management campaigns. Also, he's our expert in Agile and Scrum. And speaking about what great stuff he does at Viseven is working on our eWizard modular content approach, our eWizard content planner, which is actually very connected to, data and tagging and tracking, and our eWizard briefing tool. So Dennis, I am very happy to welcome you on stage, and please share your insights of modular content and metadata and tracking.
Hi everyone, really pleased to be joining you today. And speaking about the modular content, yeah, this is one of the things that we are now currently implementing at Viseven with our customers. And me personally, I'm deeply engaged in this subject for a couple of years already. So what you see on your screen right now, this is our content creation journey that we usually facilitate within an organization in order to implement modular as part of that. So here you see 11 stages, and I will not specify all the steps that are detailed in every stage under every number. But thing is that below what you see is actually the data enrichment, connection, and relation stage. As you see on this schema here, it is not just when you create content and then you publish it, or let's say you approve it. Every item like that, it provides you with a data point, and most of them, they do happen in digital asset management systems. Some happen in the content distribution systems and things like that. But bringing those data points together, as Oksana has previously mentioned, this is what really makes a lot of value. And based on what you see across the board in your different systems, including DAM and content management and audience reaching systems, things like that, this is where you start getting those insights. And depending on how many effort you paid in order to get data into those systems, this will define how many valuable insights and information you can get out of them in order to define what works, what not, and how you can affect that. And specifically, tagging and metadata, they are the things that that can influence it directly. Yeah, so also this subject, which is a big portion of the modular approach overall, this is basically the module itself. So for a lot of the organization, it is a new entity because currently not everyone is working with modules. It is something that you hear about, it is something that you want to learn more about and things like that. But what basically module is, this is a piece of standalone content that has context and meaning. So we are not talking about, let's say, e-detailers that have like 160 slides under it. We are talking about smaller pieces that can be created and can be approved as a standalone entity. And for the most case, you don't need a lot of stuff to start creating modules. So here you see a basic example with a header, some graph with a number of values, and then you have some supporting text, which obviously has a reference. So this is just an indication of, to quickly understand what module is. And some of you at this point may believe that you are looking exactly at this slide out of the detailer, but that's not the case, because the module, as you see it in here, it can be used for different channels simultaneously. So for example, you can pull this very module into email, into landing page, into banner ad, or something intended for the use within messengers and things like that. And you don't necessarily need to recreate it time and time again, because if you created it as a standalone entity with the meaning, with the proofs and things like that, you are good to go and go through MLR with it. And once they grant you the full support in using this module, it becomes an omni-channel entity that can be pulled into multiple channels. And this way, again, instead of creating just an e-detailer with 160 slides, what you can do is create a lot of modules. And by the time you need that very detailer, you can pull most of the information using the modules. And on the next slide, we also have a brief information that touches our today's subject, which is the metadata and tagging for modules. So since you are constructing those modules ahead of time and you are preparing to use them in order to build different content items, be it details, emails, landing pages, whatever, this is where you need to think of the things like metadata, fields, and values ahead of time, because most of the values for this stuff, they can be provided ahead of time. So when you are just, let's say, considering the launch of a new product, or let's say you are actively thinking about a new campaign, you already know the intent for the module, probably the target audience, also the language and country that you're going to be using that. And you don't need to wait for the very last point in time when you're going to be delivering that content to the target audience in order to define values for these things. And this is where you can be proactive rather than reactive. By constructing those data structures like metadata, tagging, information, details, commercial tagging, things like that. And all of that can be done ahead of time, as I mentioned again. And again, here on this slide, you also see the foundation. So I said that you can think of a lot of metadata and tagging related things ahead of time. And this is just a brief overview of how things connect, let's say, between the digital asset management system or your approval system and our platform, which is the Wizard. So here you see that we are just not storing modules somewhere in the DOM. We need to connect it to certain things. And as an example here, you see claims listed and key messages. So key messages being the broader topics like efficacy, like safety, like important safety information, dosing, some things like that. And then under each of these key messages, you're definitely going to have a number of claims, and those claims may be different depending on the references that you have or the match tags that you provided, as well as based on the target audience you creating those claims for. So for example, you can tell things to the people who are aware of your product in one way, while for the people who are totally unaware of your product, you're going to be saying things in a different way. All of that will result in claims, and obviously modules that you intend to support those different claims, they would be different. This is why you need to start thinking about metadata and classification, categories, taxonomies, and tagging structures, standards, things like that, again, ahead of time, because you are likely to have the same target audience over and over through the couple of years. You can segment them, you can classify them, you can add that into the commercial and marketing section for your further tracking and analytics. And all of that can play a huge role in you making decisions, but not rather just second guessing your thoughts when you launched a campaign, let's say a month ago, but doing the data-driven decisions instead. And this is of a great importance, I would say, because now it's not just you and the target audience, it is a lot of the proofs and the data that can support you and help you making certain decisions. And the rest, I would say, is just a technicality where you start wrapping things into the appropriate placeholders. Most obviously, it usually happens on our platform where you start creating content out of a template, then you define what channel you want, and then you start working with blocks that can pull different modules. But again, it is up to the metadata in tagging to define what modules you will see at this point. So the more you invest initially, the more you get at the steps like that. So whenever you need an image to replace while, let's say, localizing a certain material, or the moment when you need to find the respective module for the segment of audience that you are about to target, this is where you metadata and classifications and taxonomy, they start bringing revenue and value to you in the first place. And yeah, just a wrapper and a short summary that taxonomy and tagging is also a key element of the modular approach overall. So apart from just having the channel specific templates and blocks that define the layout of your content, as well as the flexible component libraries where you can select, let's say, I want this many buttons in my content, or let's say I need a certain paragraph of text being styled this way. And also having those modules within your digital asset management, you also need to have a robust taxonomy and tagging standard as an organization in order to make all those things discoverable, traceable, trackable, quantifiable, and also providing data back to you. So probably this would shortly sum up what I have in stock in terms of relation of the modular approach and tagging, but let's follow along, I guess.
Yeah, Dennis, thank you so much for leading us through the way so that we understand the relation between the module and why tagging and metadata are so important. And as I was listening to you, I thought that this is exactly what my thinking was, and I outlined that in the beginning of the webinar. So it is critical, and especially for modular content, just to see that tagging and metadata are important for identifying the proper modules that people want to use in their materials and their final tactics, but also if the assets are tagged in a proper way, then we'll be able to measure the performance of those assets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like really appreciate you guiding us all through the details on actually, where the tagging and this whole thing stands in the content creation process. And if we were to ask you, what would be like the definition of metadata and tagging that you use inside of your team, or that you normally address while talking to the clients on the modular content project. So how would you define those two very important notions? For some people, honestly, they sometimes can be misinterpreted or mixed. I just want to hear from you how you would define that.
So I would probably not tell you the exact definition of metadata and tagging, although these terms, they are used interchangeably over the industry and different organization. Thing is that I would say metadata is a part of the tagging because it's not everything, definitely. So when we talk about metadata, we mainly again talk about data about data. So whenever you have a content item, you usually classify it by, let's say, product, by language, by country, probably something else. But for the most cases, this is not the stuff that you are searching for the information. So whenever you'd like to find something, you are rarely using the language and country itself because they provide you with really little context, I would say. So what you are rather interested in is the target audience this particular content has been intended for, like the commercial tag, what is the target audience, what is the segment it was created for. I do have experiences when our customers were even including, let's say, the age categories of the target audience as part of the segmentation and tagging. So they wanted to know that this is the content for an 11-year-old, or let's say this was a piece of content for a 35-year-old, because it was important for them, and it totally makes sense. Some of the customers that we had, they are also using mutation as a sort of the categorization and a part of tagging. So this is the exact mutation, let's say, we want to classify our context about. And certainly there are certain illnesses that work for it, while if you're working with such type of illness, yeah, it may cover some of your needs. Pretty much depends on the product and the therapy area you are engaged in. But again, you should consider including things like that based on the feedback of the people who are actually searching for stuff, using your digital asset management, as well as what is important. Most of the part, it is like the target audience and also the messaging, because you are also interested in what you were trying to tell to those particular target audience in order to find it, recreate it, localize it, probably update somehow, but use it for the very same segment that you have in other country, or let's say use the same messaging for other case that you may also have somewhere within the organization. So probably event may be different, but the messaging would be still the same. So those, I would say, two main things that contribute to the tagging overall: segmentation of the target audience, as well as your communication intent. Call it basically however you want, like key messaging, claim, communication objective. Again, it pretty much depends on the naming convention that you have as an organization. But again, the intent is the same still. Hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah, that's very much aligned. How to connect all of how you tag things to actually how you use your content, and those would be the campaigns. If we talk about the standard in taxonomy, is there actually such a thing that there is a standard for taxonomy, that some foundation that companies can use as is, and then maybe build upon that? So Dennis, the question is, can you speak about if it's possible to standardize the taxonomy?
I would say I wouldn't necessarily call it a standard. So because it would be a standard only if your organization as a whole applies it. And of course, it can be different from one organization to another, because again, different things are important for different companies. However, there is a framework that can help you build the standard within your organization and call it standard moving forward. So again, as an example, I would probably just scratch the surface here, because the topic is huge, and I'm not sure we would be able to cover it in the time that we have. But thing is, I would probably guide you towards things like function in the first place, that will define, again, a lot of the structure underneath it. So let's say if your organization works with the medical content and the commercial content, then surely you need to define it within the tagging portion. If your organization works only with the commercial, then obviously a field like that won't make any sense to you, because whatever you produce is commercial by intent. Then I would also probably call out the material type, which will define, let's say, this is an e-detailer, email, landing page, whatever the channel you have. And of course, for some companies, it could be called channel or something like that. Again, pretty much depends on the naming convention. But again, you want to qualify and categorize your content by the channel it will be used in. If we are talking about omni-channel content like a module, you won't be able to select some option for it, obviously, because it is omni-channel by nature. but that's going to be probably a fourth value or fifth value in the list that you have, things like that. Also purpose, what you intend and what you would like to achieve with this particular content item. So is it something just to drive awareness, let's say, or it is something to prove that you have some benefits over the competitors? Because again, depending on the purpose, your whole narration would be different. And whenever you'd like to search for something similar, you'd probably follow the narration like that. Then again, audience, and it may be one field for you, or it may be 15 fields for you. Again, pretty much depends on how deep you'd like to be involved with the subject of segmentation and target audience. Again, for someone, it could be the age groups, the mutation types. For someone, it could be something as easy as, let's say, the marketing funnel stages, like aware, unaware, considering, loyal, things like that. Pretty much depends on the organization. And again, values differ. The approach is the same. This is the framework, not the standard as they call it. Then, of course, things like channel, again, where you're going to be using that stuff, intended use, things like the product metrics. So if you have a portfolio of product, or you have multiple products within the same therapy area, and you need to distinguish which one works best at what case, you would definitely embed that as part of your overall tagging and metadata approach for sure. So all things like that, they need to be considered before implemented. And in fact, again, this is why it's a framework. Again, this is the steps that you go through and the results that you get at each step, rather than just, let's say, a matrix or an Excel spreadsheet that here you go, implement it, and you would be good for all the cases you would probably have in the future, because that's not an option, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's what my way of thinking too. Like, to what extent we can actually apply either a standard or, as you mentioned, like a framework. And now, actually, we got one of the questions from the audience. The person is called Steve. And I think it's like makes sense to ask you right now. So you mentioned the tagging for content types, channels. That's how you mentioned. And what Steve is asking is like, when it comes to modular, are the modules specific to one format, which is like email, which fills something like dynamic creative optimization, like, those dynamic emails like you can do in Marketing Cloud or something like that? And the question essentially is like, can modules be created that can be used in different asset formats like email, digital PDF, web page, etc.?
Absolutely, they can. And whenever we are talking about modules, what you need to understand about modules is basically, by implementing the modular approach, what you do is you essentially separate a form, which is tailored for a specific channel, and the meaning, because the meaning in most cases, it is universal. So you can design the meaning without the form itself. So you can think of, let's say, this is the audience I'm going to, this is the campaign I'd like to run, this is the results that I'm about to have, or the KPIs I'm chasing about. Then basically you start designing the content from that. So the message that you are bringing to the people, and the assets that you use in order to support that meaning, that very key message or claim that you are working with. Then you think of the values that you provide to a certain target audience. So again, it pretty much depends if they are aware of your brand or not, because it may influence what image you pick or what text you use from a study, things like that. So all of that helps you building the meaning. And by approving that meaning, you already have a reusable item that you can be pulled into any channel. And other than that, all you need is basically a template for a respective channel that defines the overall look and feel. Let's say we have X number of columns, we have this font family, font type, font color, font size, things like that. Logo goes there, image goes here. and then you can basically reuse the same meaning in multiple channels. Yeah, image could be bigger or smaller depending on the channel and the device, let's say, but it's the same image that you've chosen at the point of making a decision that this is the image I'm about to use in order to prove a certain claim to a certain audience. So again, meaning could be constructed ahead of time. Form is defined by the channel you are running it into. And by having meaning separated from the form, you can reuse one and the same meaning time and time again without further investment. All you need is basically the template and blocks, and you can pull the same module as many times as needed, instead of going, let's say, to the agency and redesigning, recreating, redeveloping the stuff time and time again, which drives us to the question of overall process optimization, time to market, expense optimization, and things like that.
All right, that's cool. So essentially, if I'm right to kind of summarize it in a way, modules are not limited for any channel. Although if
yes.
Potentially, if for some reason some of the information cannot be shared as a website or something like that, that can be limited or defined either by tagging or by the business rules, correct?
By both, I would say, because tagging will help you select the appropriate asset. And again, depending on your search query or filters that you have and that help you find the stuff that you need. And business rules in its turn will govern, let's say, you can use module X with module Y for that channel, or you cannot use module Z and module Y together because they conflict in, let's say, target audience intent or something like that. Again, by designing those modules ahead of time, you'd be also able to construct and design those business rules for the content management solution to follow along moving forward. So if you define them on the module, whenever you are trying to pull them, you would definitely know what you can do with that stuff, what you cannot do, what you shouldn't do, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what I feel very exciting about the approach that you just mentioned, you know, connecting the modules to the campaign objectives, to target audience and segments, and not to channels, what additional type of data we can bring into the on the plate, mostly of the business, as the content related data in a way that it's not limited to how the channel performs in general, but how the message performs across of the channels. And message, I would say, equals the module, right?
Not necessarily, because you can have the adaptation of a same message for different target audience, and it will produce you, let's say, 5 modules or 15 modules, again, depending on how detailed and obsessive your segmentation is. Thing is, here by connecting the performance data to the modules and data and the tagging portion as well, so you are able to get the stuff, not just like this e-detailer doesn't work for whatever reason, yeah, but you are able to get the information like this whole claim doesn't work because all the content that you have created supporting this particular claim, be it detail, email, landing page, or whatever, they don't perform good. And this is the first indication for you to start thinking of whether it's a good claim. Should we use it moving forward? Or probably based on the data, we need to tweak it somehow or get rid of it altogether because it doesn't work and we've been using it for long enough to understand that no future for this particular claim.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. But let's go back to our track focused on metadata. So if we would imagine that in some point of the near future, I am supposed to start the metadata project. What would be in your honest recommendation? Like, what should be my first step in this project?
I would say I was kind of expecting that question. So the first thing I would suggest doing in a situation like that is having some sort of the audit around the systems and content that you have. because without that, you can think of the content and the digital asset management system that you have, whatever you'd like to. But oftentimes the situation that you think of and the situation that you have, they are totally different. So a good audit oftentimes bring you the insights that at certain point you are not expecting to get. However, they are useful for you in any way. So thing as I would probably try to illustrate that. So imagine like an email and Salesforce Marketing Cloud as a carrier system for it. So let's say as a platform in general, it has some mandatory fields like, let's say, subject and pre-header. And you cannot push anything into that system without providing values for these fields. So oftentimes you can think of the respective subject and pre-header by the time you are constructing the meaning, not just by pushing the content itself. So you don't need to have an email in order to push something into Salesforce Marketing Cloud. You can design that on a level of meaning by constructing modules. So whenever, let's say, you are adding the respective module into the system, you can define those subject and pre-header ahead of time. And every time you're going to be publishing that or using that as part of the Salesforce Marketing Cloud email, you'd be having the ready-made values for it. And again, any system that you use, be it Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Viva, IQVIA, wherever else that you have in the technical stack, they will define certain things like that. So by auditing, analyzing, and thinking through things like that, you can predict a lot of the situations ahead of time. So again, the next time you are about to create an email, you can think of whether we should have that subject and pre-header on an email level, or probably on the module level. What is the best option here? And then this will help you construct a robust taxonomy standard for you as an organization in general. And then also as the robust system and structure that will support you for years rather than just a couple of months. When you come up with the idea like, hey guys, we need to add this classifier or that field into the mix. And after a couple of months, you see no point in using it and you decide to deprecate it. So again, those systems should be leveraged, analyzed thoroughly, and used in order to build the overall taxonomy standard. Other than that, I would probably also list the interviews as a very important things in here, specifically on different levels within the global to local scale. Because oftentimes, let's say on a global scale, you've nailed everything. You have the ideal taxonomy standard and tagging system with all the fields and values already in place. But then you bring it up to the people on a local level and they are saying like, no, we don't use options like that, or we call it that way. So the field should be renamed, let's say. Or yeah, we have a field like that, but the list of values is different. Or let's say we have some specific local requirements that we need to work towards, and we need to embed that as part of the taxonomy standard overall. And then you start thinking of all of that and you get more context out of the people that you work with, different countries, different levels, all of that goes into the taxonomy standard that you are about to define. Also industry best practices, let's say the modular approach. So now you have a new entity that you can use to your benefit, and by defining the respective metadata on this level, it can help you automate and leverage and improve certain aspects on other levels. So for example, if you are using 5 modules, all of them having a set of respective tags, the resulting tags for the email you pour them into, you can read all those tags out, define only the list of the unique ones, because again, some of them can be the same. And then you are ready to apply this cloud of tags to the email itself. And whenever you are trying to find something, you define that this time I need an email, or yeah, I need a module, but the tags are the same. And if you type that as a search request or something, you would get the expected results with the high levels of relevancy, other than just something like you have 450 assets and go digging top to bottom through them in order to understand whether it's the stuff that you were expecting to get as a result of that query, things like that. Also, vocabularies and naming conventions, again, driving us to the question of interviews and different people calling the same things in different words, or vice versa, calling different things in one word. So you need to define things like that. You need to create some sort of vocabulary or list of terms and define that this particular thing, we put this particular meaning into it. So be it like a channel or like the material type. Would you like to say that email is either of those or something just one? You need to, again, cooperate, communicate those decisions with all the stakeholders, because they would be using that taxonomy standard and they would be contributing to it. So if they put wrong values into the fields, it won't help you, none of you, on a global, on a local level, whatever, it won't work. So you need to play on one field, you need to follow the same rules in terms of what is what, how it's called, and what meaning we put into it. And also only after like brushing through things like that, this is the point where you get to the implementation. And this is where the setup of your system will greatly influence either you're capable of actually using it or not. Because imagine like providing 25 values for every asset that you need to upload. How many how long it will take you to upload like 50 items? Do you really need all the fields at this point, or some of them could be added like automatically or derived from other selections that you've already made? That's a good point. And also, this is where you come to the question of implementation. Is your system flexible enough to incorporate all of that? Or probably you need think more of the technical capabilities of the platform that you use, either by expanding it with the use of certain plugins, if you have the support for them, switching the system, or probably adding another people into the mix who would be following the rules and making everyone play them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, to your point regarding the content audit, and of course, unless you're born today, you probably, and the organizations have like tons of historical content. And
For sure.
that audit for me is like, opening the can of worms. You never know what you find. And
yeah.
And yeah, the question is, how do you deal with content metadata that already has some historical metadata?
So in the ideal world, for sure, you'd like to include it into your newly derived standard. For the most part, it means that you need to get to do a huge migration regressive. But then, as the end goal for everyone here is to be able to find content quickly and easily, rather than just thinking of, okay, we have created this content, let's say 5 years prior to the standard. So this is the taxonomy and definition that we need to use. Or if we created it after the date, then we are free to use this sort of the filtering, things like that. So ideally, you'd like to have a single system that you use in order to find whatever you have, regardless of the point of time where you came up with the standard and made it a standard. So yeah, in terms of the implementation, it will take a lot of digging into an old content and trying to classify it by the new standard that you have. A lot of it could be automated, but pretty much depends on the case. And also this will take a lot of like data migration tasks, like go find, reclassify, apply new values to new fields, add those fields, or probably merge the values that you had in fields into one, or vice versa, and find the respective classifier that allows you, let's say, creating two options out of one, because in most of the cases, this is the more complex thing than just merge it. merging is easy and classifying is oftentimes more difficult than merging something together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds like a lot of work.
For sure.
And metadata taxonomy projects, and I'm sorry to say that on this webinar, well, those are normally big, complex projects. So my next kind of portion of questions is on the roles, people, and ownership. So I would start, let's add some buzzwords into our conversation, and I'm throwing in AI. So,
okay.
yeah, it's a big thing, and it always will, probably for the next several years. And where do you see the impact of data from AI? Like, how powerful is that?
It's obviously powerful, but thing is, most of the AI technologies that you have out of the market, they need to go through a certain process of study. So they need to help from the people in order to understand how to do certain things. So asking the question of roles that you had previously, yeah, it's always a good idea to nominate someone for a particular role who's gonna be responsible for the overall taxonomy standard definition and support within your organization. Some sort of the librarian, some organizations, they do have people like that in the IT teams. If you don't, probably consider having someone like that or nominating existing people to supplement this role. But by having a single, I would say, center of excellence, a person that you can go to and ask, like, how I need to classify this and that, what option do I need to choose here and there, and probably incorporating that into tooltips, help and support for your platform is always a good idea, and they can support you with that. And then it comes to the AI. So by people doing certain things, like let's say running scripts in order to do the migrations that we've mentioned previously, they can teach AI exactly what to pay attention to in order to do the appropriate decisions. And once the AI is robust enough to understand it on their own, they would be able to help you automate a lot of mundane and routine tasks and operations. So just to illustrate that, again, everyone is uploading tons of the assets into the digital asset management systems nowadays. And by assets, we oftentimes mean small things like the component assets, individual images, videos, audios, things like that, and also complex things like the full e-detailer with 160 slides in. Both of them are assets, but thing is, you can apply different AI mechanisms to work with them. So for example, if we are talking about images, let's say, whenever you are uploading an image, you can provide the valid set of metadata, again, like the therapy area, country, language, all the things that you are used to today. But additionally, AI can scan that image, also define all the objects that you have in it, define all the colors, some exact items that you see there. And based on this information that is provided by the machine learning and artificial intelligence services that you have out of the market today, you don't need to specify all the details about an image anymore. So AI can provide you with the respective alternative tags, let's say. It can create a cloud of tags for you that will be populated purely automatically. And you as a human moving forward, you can verify the results and let's say that this is the tag that I'm not expecting to see on an image like that. So let's delete it. And permanently it ain't gonna be added to any similar image moving forward. Also, you can define things like, again, probably the best example that I usually use in here. So imagine having an e-detailer that you've been working like a year and a half ago. And all you remember about this e-detailer is that you've used an image of a man in a green sweater. So think of the way whether the existing digital asset management system that you have will allow you effectively find that asset right now. Because most likely that e-detailer would be classified, let's say, by the therapy area, the country, the language, the image itself that you've used as part of that detailer would have file name like defined by the camera, like DSC_659925, something like that. And over a year and a half, you definitely won't remember that. Some tags that were defined manually, they could have values like gastroenterology, because this is what you were preparing for, or let's say a patient profile, because that was definitely an image for a patient profile. But can your digital asset management appropriately work with the search request like a man in a green sweater and provide you with the valid results, be it image itself that you've used in the e-detailer or the whole e-detailer itself, because the system definitely knows that you have an image classified as man in a green sweater smiling in, let's say, sunglasses next to the description. By the way, descriptions like that, they can be provided by AI nowadays, not a big deal. Same thing pretty much for audio, video, but things are getting more complex in there.
Okay. Those are for me like more the execution of the actual tagging and taxonomy.
I would say that those are the benefits. This is what you actually see as a user, but in order to get that, you need to invest a lot of time into definition of the taxonomy standard, implementation of that standard, and also following that standard with every file that you upload. Sorry, I've interrupted you.
Oh, I was just going to throw in a question from Giorgio, because he's wondering, in your experience, who should be the owner of taxonomy and tagging processes in a pharma company?
Definitely a good one. Thing as I would probably nominate at least 2 people from different spheres in order to supplement this function. So first person would be someone from the IT side who knows exactly all the systems, all the tech stack that is used within your organization, because again, those systems will govern and define certain areas for your taxonomy standard. The other person would be from the marketing or even some sort of the multi-channel excellence level somewhere there, like a person who is defining things like target audience segmentation, your communication objective and claims, key messages, things like that, because again, they will definitely influence the way how you categorize and classify the stuff that you already have. So eventually, again, the main goal here is to give your people with the possibility to easily find what you already have. Because the very search result, like a man in a green sweater, can help you find the content that you are interested in and reuse it instead of going out, paying money, and creating it from scratch. Because in the long run, reusing is always way faster, easier, and simpler than investing money time and time again. I'm not just touching the subject of return on investment here, because again, if you start counting that, that plays a lot of money.
Don't even mention this, please.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, we're almost at 1 hour of this lovely conversation, and I think it's already time to wrap up. And thank you, Dennis, for all of your inputs.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure we're going to talk to you again and again, because your insights you shared are just amazing. What I want to kind of finish this webinar with are some of the best practices that also came from our internal teams, and where are like basically 5 core things that we outline as success factors on the for the for the metadata taxonomy and tagging project. So first is implementing a special systems that will help you manage this. Standardizing, using frameworks, just as Dennis mentioned, and rules to help you govern it. So it can be the standard naming conventions or some standard framework that Dennis was outlining, let's say tag by channels, tag by key message, tag by anything that's important for your business. Engaging the users and engaging the users in a way that all in all, there will be your clients, your internal clients, to make sure that they can find the content that they're searching for, and then you'll be able to get that data based on the performance of those assets in the field. Invest in time, and I think just in this 1 hour of conversation, we touched upon that pretty heavily. Like it's gonna be business, IT, librarians, tag managers, all those people that would be dealing with the project on the business part and also on the execution part. And something that we didn't cover today, but we can definitely relate to that like later, is updating, merging, dealing with the legacy content on a regular basis, so that it's all up to date and it all reflects the business needs of your organizations. So that's from me. And Dennis, maybe you would want to add something to that. And you have just 2 minutes. No pressure.
Okay, so adding to that, I would probably say that before doing anything, pay extra time in investigating, because again, the results of those investigations, for the most part, they may be different from what you expect them to be, and based on that, it will affect whatever you're doing next. So unfortunately, there are customers that they kind of ready to jump on this subject and fix it and mix it and whatever, do whatever is needed. But when you start asking the relevant question to guys like that, they are a little bit hesitant because they either don't own this or they don't know how it happens, especially if we're talking about global to local distributions, all the regulation that you come up in there. So I would suggest doing more of the research rather than just actively going and changing something within the systems, because that's the easy part, I would say. And by doing those research interviews, taking a look at the competitors or probably some of the providers, solution architects, I don't know, some vendors you have out there who specialize in subjects like that is always a good point. So by again, there are 2 ways how you can do things. Influence things directly, I would say, either by doing or by analyzing. So analyzing directly influences what you're going to be doing next, but before actually doing that, you need to think of it. So that's probably the main takeaway from a set of projects I've been engaged into, that you need to know the ecosystem, the tech stack, the things that you have in place already, in order to bring it to the next level. Because if you don't own it, or you don't master it, or you're hesitant of what of things like what it actually is, then the project would be way longer and probably slower than you expect. So make sure you know your stuff before changing it. That's probably the advice I can give you at this point.
Yeah, well, Dennis, thank you so much for your insights, your inputs, and that open conversations that we managed to have today. Thanks everybody who posted their questions, and we still have some in our I'll call it backlog. We will address them in a follow-up email. And now, well, you can reach out to us just by scanning this code and scheduling a meeting. And I do hope that this webinar brought value to you. Again, thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully I see you again on our third session, which is next month on July 12th. With this, goodbye and have a great day ahead.
Thank you guys. Take care.